Hi, this is Stephen Cook. The other day I got an email where somebody asked some questions about marriage. They asked about the origin of marriage, that is, its beginnings, the definition of marriage, at least from a biblical perspective, and some of the role distinctions that exist within marriage. Now, a large portion of this presentation is going to be taken from my book, Making a Biblical Marriage. The first couple, man and woman, were united by God in marriage. You can read this in Genesis 2:18 through 25. When you get into the New Testament in Matthew 19, there's a verse there where Jesus is asked a question about marriage and divorce. What's interesting is that when Jesus is asked this question, he quotes Genesis 2:24 as the starting point for biblical marriage. So rather than going back to the Mosaic Law, he goes all the way back to the beginning in Genesis chapter 2. And here we have Jesus' comment. It says, "And he," Jesus, "answered and said, Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning," and this would be the beginning of time and space and history. You can see Genesis chapters 1 and 2 for that. "But that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female," and there's your gender distinction. And then Jesus said, and here he's quoting Genesis 2:24, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." Two immediate observations come into view when we think about Jesus' comment here. One is that marriage is a divine institution that was given to man at the beginning of time, space, history. And two, the first marriage consisted of one man and one woman. This is important because the Genesis account starts when history itself starts, and it shows God uniting the first humans. Therefore, marriage is a divine institution and not merely a human social construct. By saying this, it means that marriage is defined by God and not man. Now, the first couple was created in God's image to live under His provision and authority, to walk in fellowship with Him, and to fulfill the specific purpose of ruling over His creation. They, that is Adam and Eve, were to complement each other. Now, all three members of the Trinity were involved in the creation of Adam and Eve. When you read in Genesis 1:26 through 28, you have in there where God says, "Let us make man in our image." So you have all the members of the Trinity set forth implicitly in those verses. And in Genesis 1:27, it reads, "God created man in his own image," Hebrew Selim here. "In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them." So both male and female are equally created within the image of God. And being made in the image of God mean that Adam and Eve were created special. They were created with intelligence, volition, and purpose. And this made them distinct from the rest of the creation. Now they were created for a relationship, first with God, then with each other, then the animals and the world around them. They were to fulfill the divine mandate to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and to subdue it, and to rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Now Adam and Eve were created in a state of maturity as perfectly functioning adults, and were gifted with brilliant minds that were able to correctly perceive their environment and to properly communicate with God and each other. They possessed a clear sense of purpose under the authority of God. Originally, Adam was created sinless with the unhindered capacity to walk with God and to serve Him. Now, though he was sinless, Adam was not complete. And God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." And the word helper translates the Hebrew Eitzer, and I'll explain that a little later. So before God created the first woman, He took time to educate Adam about his relational incompleteness. Now God brought a multitude of animals before Adam, and this most likely occurred in pairs of male and female. And after observing and naming them, Adam realized that there was not found a helper suitable for him. And so God corrected what Adam could not. So the Lord caused Adam to fall asleep and took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that place. And God then fashioned into a woman the rib which He had taken from the man, and then brought her to the man. Now this was a divinely arranged marriage. I have a quote here from William MacDonald from the Believer's Bible Commentary in which he says, "Woman was taken not from Adam's head to dominate him, nor from his feet to be trodden down, but from under his arm to be protected, and from near his heart to be loved." The wife was created to help her husband. The word helper from the Hebrew Eitzer is an exalted term that is sometimes employed of God who helps the needy. Eve, as Adam's Eitzer, was to help him execute God's will. Now God designed the husband to be the loving leader to guide the relationship into His will, and the wife is to walk in harmony with him. The husband is to love his wife as Christ loves the church. And this is important for the husband to understand who Christ is and how Christ loves the church if he's going to love his wife following Christ as the model, as Christ who loves the church. Now biblically this is called agape love. Agape love brings God into every relationship, provides spiritual nourishment, conforms to God's will, and seeks God's glory. It stands the test of time and survives in the furnace of affliction. It is sacrificial, it is understanding and honoring, and it is greater than feelings. It is, in fact, God's love, born in the heart of the believer who walks with God and desires His closeness. The institution of marriage continued after the historic fall of Adam and Eve and took on various ceremonies based on ever-changing social customs. The Bible directs believers to marry believers, but the Bible does not prescribe a specific ceremony to follow or vows to take, but leaves these matters for people to decide for themselves. And this will complete this presentation on the subject of marriage, at least from the issue of origins, definition, and role distinctions, and I hope it's been helpful to you.